really tough and they're really rough and nothing's working, but there's something inside of you that says, I just have to follow that because you don't know who you're going to meet.
Welcome to the Binge on Self-Love podcast. My name is Anna, but you can call me Anci, and thank you so much for tuning in. Binge on Self-Love podcast is about navigating binge eating disorder struggles, disordered eating, and negative body image. Although I share my personal experience with having a negative body image, eating disorders, and I do uncover bits of my personal story, this podcast is not as much about me as it is about you. Beautiful human beings who struggle, who fight, who grow, and who evolve every single day. This podcast is for anyone who wants to feel supported on their recovery journey and simply for anyone who's trying to improve their relationship with themselves. I believe together we can turn something so negative, such as binge eating, into something more positive and hopefully go from binging on food and self-hatred to binging on self-love. Subscribe to the Binge on Self-Love podcast on your favorite platform and tune in every Tuesday for a new episode.
But there's something inside of you that says, I just have to follow that because you don't know who you're going to meet.
Disclaimer: Binge on Self-Love podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It doesn't provide professional medical advice and it is not a substitute for diagnosis or treatment. In this podcast, we cover the topic of eating disorders, so if you find this topic triggering, it may be better for you not to listen to this podcast. Always make sure to put your mental health first. Hello everyone, welcome to the Binge on Self-Love podcast. My name is Anna, but you can call me Anci, and I'll be your host today. I hope you're doing well, taking care of your physical and mental health. And I want to take a second and just say thank you. Thank you to every one of you who listens to this podcast. You have no idea how much it means to me. I know how lonely this world can feel sometimes, and that sometimes it can feel like you must be the only person feeling the way you feel, and that it can get hard and frustrating and lonely. And I feel like with this podcast, I can get a little closer to anyone who feels like this right now and be like, hey, you're not alone in this. I sometimes feel like this too, and it's going to get better. I've had a really ugly weekend last week. And when I say ugly, I mean I felt like a piece of crap. I felt really down, depressed, and hopeless, which is not the best way to start a podcast episode, but we're keeping it real here. I think there wasn't one particular situation or experience that caused it, but at the same time, I know exactly what caused it. And all that eventually led me to one thought, that sometimes accepting what is and what has happened and what decisions we've made in the past is necessary in order to grow and in order to change. And that's kind of what I would like to talk about today. And just to clarify, I don't suffer from clinical depression or anything like that. I just feel depressed from time to time, which is what I'm describing in today's episode. So now without further ado, let's get into today's episode. I don't have a positive, loving relationship with myself. It may sound a little hypocritical considering that I do a podcast about self-love and self-acceptance, but it is what it is. I have never, at least since I can remember, have liked and accepted myself, and instead of focusing on what I'm good at or what's good about me, I've always focused on what I felt like was wrong with me and on what I sucked at. And when you focus only on the negative things, quite naturally, you will eventually start to see your entire self as wrong or simply never good enough. And it's funny how much our self-confidence and inner self-worth can influence who we will become, what directions in life we will choose, and how we're going to live our lives in general. For a long time, I saw confidence as simply a character trait that some people have and others don't. And I didn't really put much value into it. I thought it has more to do with relationships and how confident you are in front of a potential love interest or whatever, but it wasn't until my early 20s that I realized confidence is about so much more. And I think confidence is more than walking around with your head held high, voicing your opinions, or feeling confident in your underwear. To me, it is about accepting yourself with everything that comes with it. The good, the bad, the messy, the confusing, the weird, the lovely, the funny, just your entire self. That, to me, is the foundation of confidence you need to start with. And then you build more and more blocks above it as you go through life. I'm sorry for speaking in metaphors here, but the point is that our confidence and our self-perception are maybe way more important than we may realize. And I think the first step to confidence is to accept yourself with everything that comes with it. Going back to that shitty weekend I've mentioned earlier, it all came down to one thing. Me feeling like I'm the worst person on earth, like I'm so behind in everything, and treating myself like the enemy. Which actually are 3 things, but whatever. I've said it multiple times, so you probably know by now that I am not a really confident person, and for the most part, I usually get by with it. It seems to be okay in my relationship, it seems to work at work, it seems to be okay within my family members and my friends, but it turned out it's not. Not being confident with who I am, not seeing my values, has turned me into someone who hates nearly every inch of her body and her personality. I've never heard anyone talking so ugly to themselves the way I talk to myself pretty much every single day. When I look at myself in the mirror, I only see the things that I would love to change. When I accomplish something, I immediately put myself down for not deserving it and for being it just a pure luck or a coincidence. Whenever I think about my past, I immediately start to recall every single moment I fucked something up. So after a few minutes, I feel like a complete failure who has never done anything right. And why do I have this desperate need to focus on what's wrong with me rather than focus on what's good? I don't know, but I think it has a lot to do with my desire to be perfect, to fit a certain idea in my mind of who I think I should be and how fast I think I should be going, and thinking that being 28 I should have already been at this point in my life or that point in my career. And during the weekend I kind of broke down. I flooded my mind with so much negativity that I felt like nothing I do will ever be good enough. And once again, I turned all that negativity against myself, thinking I'm crazy, there's always something wrong with me, what's going on? It wasn't the best time, as you can tell, that's for sure, but it made me realize one thing, or quite a lot of them actually, but one of them is that in order to grow and finally move on and change what you wanted to change for a long time, you need to accept who you are, what you look like, what traits you have, who are you, your past, the decisions you've made, and only then you can start thinking about where you really want to go. I can't change where I was born or what environment I grew up in. I can't change what school I studied, what mistakes I've made, what challenges I didn't take. I can change the fundamental part of who I am and how I am and what I look like. I can't change my past. I can keep hating myself for being 28 and not having the career or education I wish I had, but hating myself or ruminating on my past is not going to change anything. And accepting yourself and everything that comes with it doesn't mean you can't regret something you've done or that you don't learn from something you've done in the past. It simply means accepting and not judging. The feelings that I've experienced during the weekend kind of made me realize that I can spend a couple more weeks focusing on what I feel like is quote unquote wrong with me or with my appearance and hate myself for it, or I can choose to accept that this is who I am, this is how I was made, and it may not be perfect, which, by the way, perfection doesn't exist, but it's me. I can spend my time wishing I enrolled in a different school or I took a different career path, but that's not going to bring me back in time and change that. I can only accept what was and use that as something that will help me navigate and decide what I want to do now. I can also spend my time regretting that I've spent so many years with binge eating and damaging my health and my body, but I can't change that. I can only accept that as part of my past, and I can choose to do everything in my power to live life in a way that will be filled with health and balance and hopefully happiness. Self-hatred is not going to lead you anywhere. If it does, it's not going to be a place you want to be at. But I believe that self-acceptance and confidence will. So if you're maybe going through similar emotions or doubts about yourself right now, try to focus less on what was and try to accept that as part of your past. This is what happened. This is who I am. This is how I was made. This is how I was born. This is how I look. And that's perfectly fine. Yes, the past does shape us in some way, but it doesn't necessarily decide our future. We all deserve to live life being at peace with ourselves and with the way we look and how we act and who we are. And I think the only way to get to that point is through accepting ourselves with everything that comes with it. I would really, really love to know your opinion on this. So if you can, DM me on Instagram at Binge on Self-Love, or you can send me an email at anci@bingeonselflove.com and let me know what you think. So that's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe to the Binge on Self-Love podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, and follow me on Instagram at Binge on Self-Love. I'll be back next Tuesday with another episode. Until then, have a great rest of the week, take care, and talk to you soon. Bye!
Have to be your biggest fan. And when things are really tough and they're really rough and nothing's working, but there's something inside of you that says, I just have to follow that. Because you don't know who you